and welcome to another special episode of the Woollentwine Fibre Studio knitting podcast. My name is Jule and I'm the natural dyer and maker behind Woollentwine Fibre Studio, which is a natural dyeing studio located here in northern Germany. And yeah, today's episode is not really about my personal knitting or anything, but rather about something very exciting that I've also been teasing you on Instagram about, because I'm going to introduce a new limited edition yarn to you. For those of you who might be new to this channel and to my work, every now and then I do get some yarn custom spun for my shop from local sheep's wool that I source myself, and these are always just available once and as like a limited kind of edition. That's why I'm calling them like this. And yeah, they come every couple of months whenever there's a new batch ready, and yeah, I'm particularly excited about this one because yeah, it's a very special one, and it's actually a dyed one this time. And I think the last time I had naturally dyed limited edition was back in the beginning of 2020, maybe? No, 2021, I don't know, but it's definitely a while ago. And so I'm just really excited to have another limited one back that has some color in it. So without further ado, let me introduce the new base to you. So I'm looking at my notes just so I don't forget anything, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to forget to tell you something. So if there are any questions coming up, feel free to just comment down below, or maybe even just email me or DM me on Instagram. I'm happy to answer any kind of question. And yeah, I hope I can still cover as much as I can in this video. So just to let you know, I'm going to start out with some general information about the yarn, like the meterage and how it's made and where it comes from. Then I'm going to show you a couple of samples that I knitted out of the yarn so you can see how it looks like. And for this time I also prepared a couple of pattern suggestions where I share with you what I think would work with this yarn from my experience, and I've curated a little list of awesome designers whose pattern you could think of using with the yarn, just so you can have a little idea about, yeah, what could be made out of this. So yeah, let me just tell you a little bit of the general information. First of all, the yarn will be available on the 14th of January, so next Friday. Yeah, next Friday, 8 p.m. GMT +1. I'm also going to link the date below, and I'm going to put some countdown thingy into my Instagram stories, so you can also be reminded of the date if you just click those little reminding buttons. And I'm also going to send out another reminder with a newsletter, so make sure you'll subscribe to that maybe, just so you don't miss out, because yeah, as said, this one is very limited, and from the experience with my latest limited editions, they go really fast. And once it's gone, it's gone. I'm not going to get it back in this exact same way. So I would recommend maybe being on time for the update, because I would not want you to miss out or anything. So yeah. First of all, I also wanted to tell you, if you want to hear more about my sourcing process and how I came to making limited edition yarns and getting them custom spun, there is a certain episode that I recorded as a little bit of a Christmas special at the end of 2021. So if you want to hear more about my history with wool sourcing and local yarn production, then feel free to watch that video, because I'm going to cover a couple of general aspects in that one, like animal welfare and what I'm looking for when I source wool. So yeah, feel free to watch that one if you're interested in more info around it. And yeah, now let's stop rambling and get to the facts. So I'm going to be glimpsing at my notes just so I don't forget anything, but this is it. This is the yarn, and it's 100% local Romney wool from a shepherd that's actually located around a 45-minute drive from where I live. And it's really awesome because that shepherd actually is transitioning into organic farming. So yeah, it takes a while. I don't want to cover the whole organic certification process again. I'm already mentioning that in my yarn production video, but he's actually in the process of getting the organic certification. So even though I cannot call this yarn organic yet, is actually already the circumstances for the animals and everything is already comparable to everything that's certified organic, which makes me very happy because yeah, I'm just all about sustainability when it comes to sourcing my wool. So yeah, local Romney wool from below an hour away from where I live, and spun into a 400 meter per 100 grams fingering weight yarn into a woolen spun 2-ply. So it's actually very loftily spun and has this beautiful texture that you can maybe see when I'm holding it a bit closer to the camera. It's quite creamy in undertone, so it's not like a very white base. It's a bit more creamy yellow. Well, not yellow, but more of a like creamy color. And that gives a lovely undertone for dyeing on it. So yeah, but that is it, 100% Romney wool. For those of you who don't know about sheep breeds so much, Romney is actually considered one of the softest wools that is available in the northern parts of Europe. And I can definitely tell that this one is a lot softer than my previous limited editions, if I may say so. But it still has a wonderfully rustic feel to it, in just the way that I like. And from its touch, it definitely reminds me of those typical kind of Shetlandy yarns that you can knit color work with. And yeah, it reminds me of those very lofty and woolly yarns, but it still has a lovely softness to it that is just very, very, very nice. And yeah, so it's actually spun at a mill that's family run and very small and also very nice. I've visited the mill and yeah, they're doing a great job. It's a very traditional kind of mill with old machines and everything. So yeah, just perfect. And yeah, what I wanted to say about this base is that it's probably going to be the last dyed limited edition for quite a while again, because I'm kind of drawn to sourcing more like naturally colored wool for my limited editions. And I will have more whites in the future for sure, but I don't know when, so just want to yeah, stress that I don't know when I'm going to have the next dyed limited edition. So if you're into that, maybe get this one. I have been experimenting with this for quite a while. I think it arrived back in October. Yes, the base arrived back in October, and it was really hard keeping the secret for so long actually. But I usually try to thoroughly test the limited editions for their like strengths and maybe weaknesses, and so I can really make the best recommendations on what to knit with it and give you an idea of what you could do with it. And yeah, so this one was very well tested. I'm going to show you the samples in a minute, but I first wanted to say that what's really great about this is that it's actually also both suitable for garment knitting and accessories and for socks, which is what I was going for when I got it spun, because I really wanted to have a more woolly, a bit fluffier woolen spun sock yarn, as kind of as an alternative to my Corriedale sock, which I love and which is still one of my favorite sock yarns, but I still felt like I could have a little more of a woolly alternative to that one. So this turned out perfectly the way I wanted it to. So yeah, and I've actually made a little sock experiment. I know some of you already guessed it when I was posting about it on Instagram. But yeah, there was a pair of socks knitted by my mom for me because I was really busy at that time. And she knitted a pair of socks right after the base arrived and we had the first 1 or 2 test skeins dyed. She made a pair of socks for me, so I was actually able to test wear the yarn and how its durability might be for, I don't know, I think she finished them mid-October. So, and I've been wearing those socks non-stop just so I could really see whether it's suitable for a sock yarn. And luckily I can say yes. I'm gonna show you the socks in a bit, but I just wanted to point that out, that it is actually suitable for socks. Which brings me to a nice little announcement, because I was talking to my friend Lerke of Fiber Tales. I think you might know her podcast. She has a really nice podcast here on YouTube, and she is a pattern designer, and she was really inspired by the wooliness of the yarn as well, and she's actually in the process of designing a sock pattern for this yarn. So yeah, I cannot show you what it's going to be like, but I can already tell I only saw a swatch and it's going to be really lovely, and I can really imagine it's going to be very pretty in this yarn. So yeah, if you are a lover of Lerke's style and her designs in general, then you can just think of maybe purchasing a skein for that pattern, because yeah, it should come out not too long, like it should come out rather soon, not like in half a year or so, so rather soon. But there is no date yet, so I'm gonna keep you updated about that in the newsletter and also on Instagram. But yeah, there's a pattern coming by Lerke, and it makes me really happy to know that. And yeah, having seen the swatch, I can tell it's going to be very lovely. And yeah, so yeah, apart from being suitable for socks, it also is really great for color work, I suppose. I have not knitted a color work sample, but from the touch and from how it blooms when blocking, I can definitely tell it's going to be very lovely and lofty in color work. And yeah, as well as just being knitted on its own for a garment, that's of course possible too. But yeah, as I said, it kind of has this, how do you say, lofty and woolly grip that I think makes it very easy to even out a color work pattern, like really letting the stitches relax and everything, so I can feel that the texture is very suitable for that. And I have a couple of color work patterns in my pattern suggestions that should work with that as well. And yeah, lastly, I have actually thought, because I know it can be frustrating when there's a limited edition of a yarn and there is not like the perfect color that you want to include in a color work or something. And so I was looking into alternatives that you could maybe combine this yarn with, that are maybe more widely available. And luckily I found out that this yarn is actually pretty much the exact same gauge as Tukuwool fingering. Tukuwool fingering is a Finnish landrace and textile blend that is also woolen spun and available at quite a few local yarn shops all over the world by now. And they have also lovely colors, and from neutrals to a bit more punchy colors, and they have a really wide palette. So in case something is missing in your color work planning, then it should be possible to combine the two yarns. For those of you who are not familiar with the Tukuwool, there are two different fingering weight options, and there is one, I think that's called Tukuwool sock. That's with nylon, and Tukuwool fingering is without. So what I'm talking about is the version that's just pure wool without a nylon. And I actually did swatches to see. So this is the Tukuwool. I don't know if you can see, but this is the Tukuwool, and this is the limited edition. It also gives you maybe a little bit of a better idea of how the texture is. And as you can see, if you hold those two together, it's quite similar in texture. And I also measured the gauges. I knitted these two gauges or gauge swatches on 3 millimeter needles, and they ended up being exactly the same size. So yes, if you want to combine a yarn with the limited edition, Tukuwool fingering will definitely work. And yeah, they are very, very similar in texture. Also, if I touch it, they have the same kind of, it's not tacky, but you know what I mean when you want to, like, it's not a sleek worsted spun yarn, it's more of a woolly feel, and they both have a little bit of a hairy little halo, which I don't know if you can see, but yeah, maybe like this. So yeah, I can imagine it's going to be very amazing for color work and yeah, anything else basically. Also, it's very lightweight and very generous in yardage because yeah, with woolen spun yarns, I don't know how familiar you are with this, but there basically is more air trapped between the fibers, so that's why usually woolen spun yarns are a bit fluffier and also way more lightweight, and also sometimes a bit warmer than worsted spun ones, because they just trap more air between the fibers, and that air can warm up and then really keep you warm. But yeah, I wanted to show you the swatch again more closely, just so you can see. This is, by the way, the undyed colorway, like the white. And also I will record another video where I show all the colors that will be available, because I wanted to have a really wide palette of colors, also of colorways that are new ones, like not the ones that I regularly dye on like BFM Massam or the Corridor base. So there should be a really wide variety for color work and everything. So, and also of course undyed if you want to add some, like a white color to your color work project or something. Yeah, so let me show you a couple of samples that I knitted with this yarn. I want to start out with the least glamorous one, because yeah, I was talking about the pair of socks that I've been wearing non-stop, and this is it. It's just a very simple ribbed sock, and I purposefully did not depill or anything, because I wanted you to honestly see how it looks after roughly 3 months of wear. So you can see, of course, it has pilled a little bit, but I have to tell you, I wore these pretty much, like with a few washing breaks, I wore those every day on top of my regular socks while I was working in the studio. And I do wear shoes in the studio just because I'm walking around a lot, and my feet can be a bit, like they can start to hurt when I'm working around and dyeing too much and I'm not wearing anything that supports them. So I do wear shoes, and I had those in shoes for 3 months, and I think they look pretty good, and they are still in pretty nice condition, even at the heel. I don't know if you can see, but I will try. Like, for 3 months, no, how long is it since October? October, November, December. Yeah, kind of 3 months of wear. I think they are in really, really amazing condition. And there is also no hole whatsoever, not even at the foot, like bottom of the foot part or at the heel or anything. So I think we can approve that this one is suitable for socks. So speaking of socks, I was also wanting to knit another sample so I can show you something a little less worn maybe. And so I'm getting to you with the second sample, which I think I showed you the beginning in podcast episode 4 or something. But this is my second sample, and it's the Gros Socks by Lerche of Fibertails. So yeah, these are just pretty simple stockinette sock, but with a really nice cuff detail, like with these little flower plant thingies. And yeah, I did modify the heel a little bit because I actually did not, it was not on purpose, because I just didn't read the pattern completely, and I just knitted the heel as I normally do. So yeah, I did like a ribbed heel with the garter stitch border, and then just regular stockinette stitch for the foot, and some regular Kitchener stitch at the front. So yeah, I knitted these on a 2.25mm needle, and they basically turned out the way the pattern states. So I think, as far as I know, you could basically swap the yarn with any other sock yarn. Maybe consider going down to a 2mm needle if you have a looser gauge, because yeah, with woolen spun yarn it definitely holds up better when you knit it at a tighter gauge. So 2.25mm needles worked perfectly for me, and I knitted the size 2, I think, because I have pretty small feet, but I prefer to wear my woolen socks on top of my tights, and so I like when they're not too snug. And these also fit really perfectly and just turned out exactly how I wanted them to be. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to knit. And the colorway I used, by the way, is the colorway Mulberry, which I'm going to have dyed on some more skeins if you would like to knit a pair comparable to mine. So yeah, and maybe with this project I can also show you, because this is still the ball of leftover yarn, which is quite a lot, I think. I can maybe show you the makeup. Is it showing? I can show you the, yes. This is how the thread looks. Like, it's very nice and textured and very fluffy. And yeah, this is the Mulberry colorway, and I really like how it turned out. I was looking for something that's like a little bit closer to the original color that Lerche used for her original sample. And I think it is really nice and a bit more cooler and berry toned maybe. But I really like it, and I can already tell they are going to be very cute with the little flowers looking out of my boots at the top. So yeah, my Gros Socks by Fibertails. So next up is a sample that is a little bit more of like an accessory, but I wanted to show how it looks if you're not knitting it at a too tight of a gauge, and a bit more on the looser side. And this is the Limelight shawl. I don't know if you can see, but oh, I'm showing it backwards, I'm sorry, but this is how it's supposed to look. It's a really pretty lacy kind of shawl, and it's a pattern by Johanna from the 52 Weeks of Shawls by Line. And I think it's really funny because I did not knit this sample. It was, my mom was like, oh, I want to test the new base and I don't have anything nice to knit. May I knit like a shawl or a sample out of the yarn? And I'm like, well, sure. Whatever I can show is perfect. And I was really busy at that time, as I said, and didn't really have a lot of knitting time. So she knitted it and she really liked the Limelight shawl, but she, like me, she's a bit more of a, not too much of a colorful person. And so she decided to omit the second color in the shawl and just knit it in one color. And I think it's really nice because it really lets the lacy parts shine. They are really beautiful, and yeah, with just some garter stitch borders between the lacy parts, I think it really shows off the lace very well. So yeah, it's just a very simple, quite a small shawl. Like not small, but I usually wear the really big ones, so this is more on the medium, not too large of a size. And if I remember correctly, I think she only used 2 skeins of the yarn. Can you see? I'm a little bit too short right now, sorry. But yeah, I think she just used 2 skeins. So as I said, it's really a generous yarn when it comes to yardage. You can go really far with it because, as said, with the air being trapped more between the fibers, it's very lightweight, but still like a little bit puffier. So yeah, this is the shawl in kind of like, it's a neutral beigey tone, and it was only a test dye, and I really liked it so much that I dyed up more of this colorway and called it Shell. So if you want something very similar to this colorway, you can get the Shell colorway. Maybe Shell is a tiny bit cooler in undertone, but only a tiny little bit. I'll show you another sample in the Shell colorway, so you can see it a little bit more closely maybe. So this is the Limelight shawl by Johanna. Okay, my camera decided to stop recording again, but I was saying that this is the Limelight shawl by Johanna, and she, I think all patterns from the 52 Weeks of Shawls book should be available individually by now, so you don't need to buy the full book if you want to knit this shawl. But yeah, I'm really happy with it. And also about a wear around the neck, I don't feel like it's itchy at all. The fiber of the Romney itself doesn't have a lot of those prickly longer hairs, so I feel like this is very, like, totally wearable around the neck, at least for me. I mean, I feel like I say this in every video, but it's a very individual thing, whether you're sensitive or not to wool being next to your skin. But for me, this is definitely, even though it doesn't feel as soft as some yarns, I feel like it's still less itchy. I don't know if that makes sense, but like sometimes there are really soft yarns, but they have longer staples in them. And once they come out and you get warm, they can get prickly anyways, even though the whole yarn is very soft. Like it can be like that with mohair. That's a very soft fiber, but with the long hairs, it can be prickly. And with this, I just feel like it's very warm and it's not by no means there is anything like sticking out that can maybe disturb. And yeah, if you want to compare it to my other, the last two limited editions, I would say it's way softer and way less rustic, but still has the right amount of rusticness, if that makes sense. So yeah, I can totally wear this around my neck with no problem at all. And yeah, if I was comparing it to Shetland wool, like I did in the beginning, I think it's even a little bit softer than Shetland. Yes, definitely softer. So, enough rambling about the shawl. Let's get to the next and the biggest sample. And I'm actually really proud of this because I knitted this in no time. It was flying off my needles and I didn't expect it to be finished when I'm recording this video. I thought I would maybe have a part where I can show you the texture of the fabric, but I didn't expect it to be actually finished, blocked and everything. But the pattern was just so addictive that I had to kind of keep knitting all the time. And this is the Fairy Bouquet sweater by Joanna. Please don't quote me on that. I am not 100% sure if it's Ang or Ang. So, but I will link her below anyway. So this is the Fairy Bouquet, and it features this beautiful textured yoke with a little bit of like a slip stitch kind of pattern, or wrapped stitch rather, and those little eyelet lace section, and then this little ribbing part here, and that one actually unfurls into a really pretty sleeve detail that goes all the way down the sleeves until the cuffs, and I think it's so pretty. And that's actually made by using a wrapped stitch technique as well, and it's very easy to do. And yeah, this sweater was really, I was wanting to make a sample where I can show you how the limited edition looks like combined with a mohair, like a strand of mohair. Just a little disclaimer, I'm only using ethically sourced mohair from Knitting for Olive, because that one is the one where I can ethically be okay with using it. But yeah, that's what I wanted to show to you because it's just so beautiful and fluffy. I'm trying to show you how the texture looks like. It's very lightweight and also has a lot of a halo. I don't know if you can see that. I feel like the white hairs are washed out by the background a little bit, but yeah, it's very fluffy, but still I think it really shows the beautiful yoke pattern very well still. And yeah, the colorway I used again is shell, as kind of in the shawl, but it's a little bit cooler, and also of course I combined it with another strand of mohair. But yeah, this is the shell colorway, and from the Knitting for Olive mohair I used the Dusty Rose, Rose Mushroom? I have to look it up again and put it down below, definitely. I'm not 100% sure, but it was something like Mushroom Rose? I think Mushroom Rose was the name of it. Like a kind of a rosy beige tone that really fits well, because I really like it when there is not too much of the mohair. The mohair is not contrasting with the original yarn that you're using. So maybe I should show you the texture, like the difference in texture next to each other, because yeah, this is without mohair, and then this is the yarn knitted with some mohair. So, about the hard facts on this pattern, I used 4.5mm needles, and I think the gauge is 18.5 stitches per 10 centimeters, and with the stated needle size that was 4.5, I ended up having a little bit of a too small gauge, so I suppose the gauge with mohair should be around 19 to 20 stitches per 10 centimeters or 4 inches maybe. And so I ended up just knitting it a size larger than I would usually do. So I knitted a size 5 instead of a size 4. And I also wanted it to be very generous because the sleeves, I don't know if you can see that, but the sleeves are designed to be kind of puffy. And I really like when those kind of balloony sleeves are a bit wider, so I wanted it to be very generous. And I also was a bit afraid because I don't usually knit round yokes for myself, and I wasn't sure, I didn't want it to be too tight, so, but it fits perfectly. I'm definitely going to insert some pictures of me wearing it, so you can see how it looks worn. And with the yardage, I mentioned this 2 times now, but it's really crazy how far you can get with this yarn, because held double with the mohair, I used 4 balls of the mohair, which are 25 gram each, and I cropped this, like the sweater, quite a bit, so keep that in mind. So I would definitely get a 5th skein if you wanted to make it the regular length. But for the cropped length, I had 4 balls of mohair and a little bit over 2 skeins of the limited edition, which is kind of crazy. I think I used maybe like not even 250 grams. Like, it's really crazy. But yeah, it's a fingering weight yarn, so it's a 400 meter per 100 grams, so it goes really far. And yeah, if you hold it double and you knit it on 4.5mm needles, then yeah, you can go really far with it. So yeah, for a size 5 I used only this little yarn. And yeah, I mean, of course, if you want to knit yourself a garment, you're not sure about the yardage, definitely get 1 skein more than you think maybe, and don't go too short on it, because yeah, as I said, the yarn won't be coming back anytime soon. And yeah, if you run out of yarn, I cannot like give you more of it, so that would be it would be a pity. So I recommend definitely getting a little bit more than you think maybe. And this is the Fairy Bouquet sweater. I also really like the construction, because I don't know if you can see, but after the round yoke part here, you end up adding some raglan increases as well, which gives a lot more depth in the armhole than if you would just do a regular round yoke. And I really like that construction, because oh, I have mohair in my sorry, I have some mohair in my mouth. But the depth, I do like a little bit of a deeper armhole, and so I just really loved the idea of combining a round yoke construction with the raglan increases. And even though the last rows, because there's so many stitches on the needle of the raglan increases, they take ages. I kind of was knitting almost a whole day only to do the last increase rows. But it was really worth it, and once you separate for the sleeves, it just goes really quickly. But yeah, it's a very clever construction, and I can only recommend checking Joanna out, because she really has some other beautiful patterns as well that I'm even having in my to knit list. So let's see if I find the time to knit them all. But yeah, this is my Fairy Bouquet sweater, and in the colorway Shell with a strand of mohair. So I really hope you have a little bit more of a feeling how the yarn looks in different textures. if I would compare them, I can definitely say that the combination with Mohair feels like a soft cloud. It's really, really soft. And it also is very lightweight, but also nicely drapey, because I was a bit afraid that because it has this kind of a woolen spun character, I was afraid it might not be suitable for garments for my liking. But it really is, and I don't know if you can see that it has a nice kind of drape. And if knitted at a little bit more of a looser gauge than my 3mm swatch, I'm pretty sure it will also be very nice and have a nice drape on its own. But it's really funny because it feels so much more dry to the touch. Not really dry, how do you say that? Kind of a dry to the touch. Knitted on its own, and then with the Mohair it's so silky. All of a sudden it's really funny how big the difference is if you compare it with the Mohair. So yeah, very versatile, I would say. From nice and colorwork suitable Shetlandy to very hard wearing on socks and very silky and cloud-like with Mohair. I think it's, yeah, suitable for so many things, which is also why the list of patterns I curated for this limited edition is really long. So I'm really sorry if the next part is a bit, yeah, too long, but you can also just skip it. I'm going to add timestamps to the video anyway, so if you're not really interested in the pattern suggestions, you can just skip it all and yeah, just go to the end part where I'm reminding you about the hard facts again. So yeah, I'm going to chat you through some pattern suggestions now. So about some pattern suggestions for the limited edition number 4 yarn. I first want to put a little disclaimer out there that none of the designers I mention has asked me to mention them in the podcast, nor paid me or anything. I'm just sharing this as a little bit of an inspiration. I'm not trying to do any kind of promotion or anything. It's just that you can maybe have a little bit of a more of an understanding on what's possible with this yarn. So yeah, just a little disclaimer that no one asked me, was like, oh, please mention my pattern in your video. I just curated this list all by myself with no marketing kind of intentions. So, and another disclaimer, I'm probably going to pronounce some of these names very wrongly, and I'm already sorry to the designers, but I'm trying my best to do it the way I think is correct. But yeah, please bear with me if I'm saying something very weirdly, because yeah, neither English nor Finnish or anything is my native language, so if I'm making a mistake, I hope you'll bear with me. So I've categorized the patterns in colorwork and colorwork patterns where the yarn is used on its own, and also where it's used with a strand of mohair, just so we can cover all the different textures I showed you in the samples, and also I added a couple of sock patterns that might work. Quick reminder that also any kind of pattern that is knitted in Tukuwool, Tukuwool fingering to be exact, should be working in this yarn as well. So yeah, if there is anything that you're interested in from the Tukuwool fingering designs, then you should be able to just swap it with the limited edition. So yeah, also I wasn't sure how it works with pictures, because I would have loved to insert pictures of the designs on the screen, but I'm not sure how this works with copyright and everything, and I don't want to get in trouble with these kind of things, so I'm only linking the patterns below, so you can maybe just check them out. And yeah, if you cannot use Ravelry, I don't know whether all the designers have a Lovecrafts or an alternative account or their own websites. So I'm probably going to insert the Ravelry links, and just as a little warning, if you're having trouble with a new Ravelry design, I would suggest maybe just Googling the pattern and see if it's on a different platform. It should be for most of the designers, but I'm not 100% sure. And yeah, also some of those patterns are from magazines or books, but apart from one, if I remember correctly, they should all be available as an individual pattern as well. So no need to buy a whole book or magazine for a pattern that I suggest, apart from one pattern, but I'm also going to tell you which one that is. Starting with the colorwork patterns, I really love, for many years, and I've been wanting to knit that one for so long, the Marit cardigan by Kristin Drysdale. That pattern was released in Liner magazine issue 7, and it's an all-over colorwork with kind of a flowery motif. It's originally designed in Tukuwool fingering, and it's just gorgeous, and I've been wanting to knit it for way too long, so maybe I should take it as an opportunity, but I also don't want it to take too much of the limited edition from the shop. But yeah, that one is really pretty. And then also the Lunenburg pullover by Amy Christophers. That is a really pretty kind of more traditional yoke colorwork sweater. And it's really pretty because it's just a very, yeah, kind of minimalistic colorwork pattern that I really love, and yeah, can only recommend. By the way, if you need help with choosing colors for your colorwork project, feel free to hit me up and I'll try to snap you some pictures of the yarn and how it looks with different combinations. But yeah, the Lunenburg pullover is really pretty as well. And another colorwork sweater that's a bit less colorful, if you will, is the Otra sweater by Skandia. That one is has a really cool construction, and I've been planning to knit one of those for my boyfriend for quite a while, because it's also really unisex. When it comes to not the design elements, but to the shaping, because if I remember correctly, she designs the a yoke part to be knit in the round and then sticked for the sleeve openings, just so it's not like a round yoke, but shaped a little bit more boxy for broader shoulders or something. And that one is just one color for the whole body, and then one contrasting color that's just having a really pretty cross and yeah, minimalist kind of colorwork pattern in the yoke. And yeah, it's a really beautiful pattern. I can only recommend. Those are the kind of colorwork recommendations I would have. And then for the single-stranded versions, I can definitely recommend the Nishi Nishi cardigan by Yamagara or Bernice. Sorry, I'm checking my notes. I think it's Bernice Lim. And she has these, it's a very beautiful ribbed cardigan knitted in a fingering weight yarn. And I think it would be very nice because I'm not sure if it's just a ribbing or a fisherman's rib or even brioche. Should have looked that up. But what's nice about the yarn in these kind of, like for example in brioche stitch, is that it's not as heavy and it won't drag down too much because it's just so lightweight. So yeah, I can really recommend that if you want to knit a little bit more of a an easy cardigan. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. And then for the single-stranded recommendations, I also have the Ilha sweater by Orlan of Tête Bêche. I love Orlan's patterns in general, but she has this really beautiful sweater that's a little bit like the Fairy Bouquet one, but it has a textured yoke, but it's all knit in one color still, if you're not too much into a lot of colors. This one would be perfect, and it looks really pretty, and yeah, it's definitely on my to knit list for the next month or so. I already have a yarn laid out for it, and yeah, so maybe if you decide to knit along the Illa with me, then hit me up and we can have a little knit along maybe and update each other on that. And another pattern that I would really think is a really pretty option for a single-stranded limited edition would be the Soya by Sari Nordlund, because that one is just a dream of a cabled, more traditional textured sweater, and it's with texture all over. It has cables, it has moss stitch, it has everything that you would like in a very textured sweater, and yeah, it's just really lovely, and I've definitely also been wanting to knit this one. Yeah, but too little knitting time at the moment, I guess. But yeah, the Soya by Sari Nordlund is also very beautiful. And again, I can also imagine, from having knitted a very textured sample out with the Fairy Bouquet sweater, I can imagine that the cables will really pop in this yarn, as they usually do with woolen spun yarns. So yeah, definitely very suitable for that yarn as well. And then if you're not into having too much of a texture or color work, I also assembled a few patterns that are a bit more minimalistic and with mostly stockinette stitch, and one of them is also, like, not on one of them, a few of them are also with mohair. So with my first recommendation would be the Cozy Classic Raglan by Jessie Maid, and she has designed this super epic classic raglan sweater that I really love that one, and I think it's just perfect because it is very minimalistic, but it's just very well designed, and as far as I remember, there are also little instructions on how to really modify it to your body shape, which I think is really innovative and really great, and I'm happy that Jessie made the effort to come up with this. And yeah, that would be a little bit more of a plain, more minimalistic idea to knit with the yarn. Or even maybe the Forager by Melody Hoffman, which is a little bit more boxy in shape, but also a raglan construction. And I think that could work really well if you would pair the limited edition with a strand of mohair as well. So yeah, this about the little bit more classic and plain patterns. Or maybe another long-time favorite of mine, what would also work is the Istava by Johanna of Line. That's a cardigan that is designed, I have not remembered how the stitch is called, but the stitch is kind of like the one I had in my visiting cardigan, like where you alternate rows of, I really cannot explain this well, but it's a very subtle kind of pattern, and so it's still kind of minimalistic, but with a little bit more of pattern twist on it, so not only stockinette stitch. And yeah, that one is originally designed in a DK weight with mohair, but I think if you would knit it at a little bit more of an open gauge with the limited edition, it should totally work, because it, as I said, it really blooms up and fills in any gaps. So I think the Istava is also designed in 4.5mm needles, so yeah, after knitting the Fairy Bouquet sample in that needle, with that needle, it should work, I guess. Yeah, and lastly, of course, if you want to hold it with mohair, I can really recommend the Fairy Bouquet sweater. It was so addictive to knit, as I already mentioned. And yeah, it was just such an enjoyable knit, and I already know that some of you are looking into knitting that one out of the yarn, so please tag me in any kind of pictures that you might take from your works in progress if you end up knitting the same pattern. That would be really cool. So, because this video is probably going to be very long already, I also want to quickly go through some recommendations for socks and shawls that you could knit out of the yarn. The first one being, of course, the grow socks that I knitted out of the yarn already. That pattern is by Leke of Fibertails. And then there is also the Unity sock by Nina Tanskanen from the 52 Weeks of Socks book by Leine. And another one that I really love from that book is the Intersections sock. If you prefer knitting socks toe up, then that would maybe be a good suggestion. They are both the Intersections and the Unity socks are textured all over. So I guess they are also very entertaining to knit. And yeah, the Unity is a cuff down and the Intersections is a toe up pattern. So I can really recommend those as well. And then lastly, a sock pattern that's also on my to knit list is a Vuosari. Oh gosh, Finnish words. Vuosari sock pattern by Koti Kotoni or Jenny Ansa. And she has those, yeah, it's a textured sock as well, but it has more, like, it's not one texture that goes all over, but it has a little bit more of a cable-y panel in the middle going down the foot. Yeah, and I just think it's really pretty. That one I think is also knitted on a 3mm or 2.5, so not like the tightest sock gauge, and they look so cozy, those socks. I'm so sorry that I can't show them all in pictures right now, but yeah, I hope that these little recommendations might help anyways. About socks, shawls, I think what would be really nice out of the yarn would also be the Stay Soft by Vera Välimäki. She has this pattern out for quite a while, and I think it just takes one skein of each color, and you need 3 colors, and then they are kind of, there's a stripy part and a one colored part, and it kind of is like there are those panels that are going together, and I really like that pattern. I've actually cast on for this pattern with a different wool or yarn quite a while ago, but haven't come too far. I should maybe get out that whip. But yeah, that one, and also the Limelight that I showed you in the Sampo by Johanna. And it's, yeah, I really think that this yarn looks nice knitted in garter stitch as well. So the whole Stay Soft shawl is in garter stitch, so I think it should look very nice in that yarn because it's so plump and nice. And last but not least, there is a pattern in the new Leine magazine issue 13, and that's the only one that I think is not available as an individual pattern yet. It's the Simple Dimple by Maria Matveva, and it's just a very nice, slightly textured, but more on a geometrical kind of texture side shawl, and I think that one is really pretty. It's, yeah, I think it's originally designed in a kind of a tweedy, kind of plump yarn, so I think it would go really well with the wooliness of the Romney yarn. So yeah, I think it could work very well. So as said, I'm going to link all the patterns below just so you can see what I recommend. And I think we're already at the end of this very long and rambly introduction of the new yarn. As said, after this video goes up, I'm also going to record a video about the colors that are available, and once that's done, you can definitely maybe have a better idea of what's going to be available. Yeah, and now just a quick reminder that the yarn will go up into the shop with the next shop update on January 14th at 8 PM GMT +1. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm really looking forward. I'm excited to see what color combos you might choose. As said, I'm glad to help if you need any help with choosing color combinations. And yeah, I really hope you will enjoy the yarn as much as I did. I hope this little intro was helpful and gave you an idea of how the yarn works and behaves. So yeah, until next time, see you, bye bye.